All right, let's be real. We have all been there. You sit down, you've got the books open, you are determined to be productive, and then boom, suddenly cleaning your entire room or maybe just staring at a speck on the wall seems like the most fascinating thing in the entire world.
Sound familiar? I bet it does. It's that sinking feeling, right? You look at the clock and an hour has gone by, but you've gotten, well, pretty much nothing done. And I want you to know you are definitely not alone in this. This is like a universal struggle for students everywhere.
And that's usually when this thought pops into your head. You know what? Do I even need this degree? Maybe I should just move to the mountains and start a farm. It's that classic escape fantasy when things get tough. But what if I told you there's a way to break free from this whole cycle without, actually having to learn how to farm?
Okay, so to fix this problem, we've got to understand why our usual study methods are so broken. It really all comes down to what you could call a vicious study cycle that traps even the most hardworking, dedicated students. And this is the heart of it. You're putting in hours and hours of work, right? But the results just aren't there. It leads to this loop of cramming and then feeling super disappointed with your grades. And look, this isn't about you being lazy. It's about working hard, but just in the wrong direction. So let's change that. Let's flip this whole thing around and start working smart. So the first set of cheats we're going to talk about, they have nothing to do with your textbooks or highlighters. Nope. This is all about psychology. We're going to play a few simple mind games to basically trick your brain into wanting to study. Sounds good, right?
It all starts with something called Parkinson's law. Basically, work expands to fill the time you give it. And this is so true. Think about it. If you tell yourself, okay, I've got 3 hours to study, your brain immediately thinks, sweet, plenty of time to check my phone, get a snack, stare out the window. The task feels huge, so your brain naturally looks for ways to procrastinate.
So here's the first trick. It's called the 20-minute trick. You just tell yourself, I'll just study for 20 minutes. That's it. Because here's the thing, anyone can do something for 20 minutes, right? It feels so easy that your brain just stops resisting. And the magic part? Once you actually start, you almost always end up going for way longer. Okay, here's another one, the timer trick. This is for instant focus. You know how you get that laser focus right before a deadline is due? This is basically creating that feeling on demand. You set a timer for 30 minutes and you study like it's an emergency. Then, and this is key, you take a 5-minute break totally guilt-free. You repeat that cycle. This keeps you from burning out and stops that fake studying we all do, where you're just staring at a page. All right, so we've tricked our brains into getting started. That's half the battle. But now, how do we make sure what we're learning actually sticks? We need techniques that really burn this information into our long-term memory, not just cram it in there for one test and then forget it. There's that famous quote, often attributed to Einstein, that says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And he was so right. Real understanding isn't about memorizing jargon. It's about breaking things down. And that idea, that's the key to this next technique. So I want you to actually try this. I call it learning like a genius. Pick a topic, any topic, and pretend you have to explain it to a 5-year-old. Go on, say it out loud. The second you get stuck, or you find yourself using a big, complicated word, bam, that's it. That's the exact spot where your understanding is weak. So you go back, you relearn just that little bit, and then you try to explain it again, even simpler this time. This forces you to truly get it, not just repeat it. And this really gets to the heart of passive rereading versus something called active recall. Look, we all do it. We just reread our notes over and over. It feels productive, but honestly, it's an illusion. It doesn't stick. Active recall, though, that is scientifically proven to work. It's like doing a push-up for your brain. Yeah, it's harder, but it's what actually builds that strong memory. So, how do you actually do active recall? It's simple. After you read something, close the book. Seriously, close it. And then, for memory, say out loud or write down the key points. When you use flashcards, don't just read them. Test yourself. That act of pulling the information out of your brain is what locks it in. All right, next up, we're talking efficiency. Because it's not just about how you study, it's about what you study. Believe me, the top students do not try to learn everything. They are masters at focusing their energy only on what has the biggest impact. And this brings us to the 80-20 rule. You might have heard of it as the Pareto principle, and for studying, it is an absolute game changer. The basic idea is that 80% of your results on an exam are going to come from just 20% of your study material. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to find that critical 20%.
And I mean, just look at this. It makes it so clear, right? That little slice of key effort, that 20%, is what produces the huge chunk of your results. So we've got to stop wasting our time on all the tiny little details that probably won't even be on the test and just zero in on the really important stuff.
So the big question is, how do you find that 20%? Well, you have to become a detective. Ask yourself, what's actually going to be on the test? Go find past exams. Ask your teacher for hints. And here is a pro tip. This one is huge. Start with a practice test before you even begin studying. It will immediately show you what you don't understand and what topics are the most important. Okay, we've covered motivation, we've covered techniques, but this final piece of the puzzle, this is the one that really separates the top students from everybody else. It is easily the most overlooked and yet probably the most powerful brain upgrade you can get. So let me ask you a question. When does your brain actually lock in all that information? I mean, you can spend hours and hours cramming, but when does that stuff actually move from short-term memory into long-term storage? The answer is while you sleep. That's it. It's not during that intense study session. It happens when you're not even awake. Your brain does all its most important work, filing away memories and making connections while you're asleep. And this is why pulling an all-nighter is literally one of the worst things you can do for your grades. It might feel productive, but you are actively stopping your brain from processing all that information you just crammed in. Your retention plummets. The real secret to learning isn't more coffee, it's getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That's when your brain actually locks in the information.
And you know, the best part is these are totally free brain upgrades. Sleep, that 7 to 8 hours, is when your brain files everything away for the long term. And exercise, even just a short walk, can give your memory a serious boost. It's incredible.
So let's put it all together. Here is your 6-step study cheat sheet. First, use short study sprints with the timer trick. Next, trick your brain into starting with just 20 minutes. Then, teach it to someone, or just pretend to. Always test yourself instead of just rereading. Use that 80-20 rule to focus only on what matters most. And finally, the ultimate upgrade: sleep and exercise. So there you have it. You now have the entire toolkit to study so fast it almost feels like you're cheating. The only thing left is to actually do it. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you have the cheats, which bad study habit are you going to break first?